Chapter 1 of Midnight by Octavius Roy Cohen. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Roger Moline. Midnight by Octavius Roy Cohen. Chapter 1 Out of the Storm. Taxicab number 92381 skidded crazily on the icy pavement of Atlantic Avenue. Spike Walters, its driver, cursed roundly as he applied the brakes and with difficulty obtained control of the little closed car. Depressing the clutch pedal, he negotiated the frozen thoroughfare and parked his car in the lee of the enormous Union Station, which bulked forbiddingly in the December midnight. Atlantic Avenue was deserted. The lights at the main entrance of the Union Station glowed frigidly. Opposite, a single arc lamp on the corner of Cypress Street cast a white, cheerless light on the gelid pavement. The few stores along the avenue were dark, with the exception of the warmly lighted White Star restaurant, directly opposite the Stygian spot where Spike's car was parked. The city was in the grip of the first cold wave of the year. For 2 days the rain had fallen, a nasty, drizzling rain which made the going soggy and caused people to greet one another with frowns. Late that afternoon the mercury had started a rapid downward journey. Fires were piled high in the furnaces, automobile owners poured alcohol into their radiators. The streets were deserted early, and the citizens, for the most part, had retired shiveringly under mountains of blankets and down quilts still redolent of mothballs. Winter had come with freezing blasts which swept around corners and chilled to the bone. The rain of 2 days became a driving sleet, which formed a mirror of ice over the city. On the seat of his yellow taxicab, Spike Walters drew a heavy lap robe more closely about his husky figure and shivered miserably. Fortunately, the huge bulk of the station to his right protected him in a large measure from the shrieking wintry winds. Mechanically, Spike kept his eyes focused upon the station entrance, half a block ahead. But no one was there. Nowhere was there a sign of life, nowhere an indication of warmth or cheer or comfort. With fingers so numb that they were almost powerless to do the bidding of his mind, Spike drew forth his watch and glanced at it. Midnight. Spike replaced the watch, blew on his numb fingers in a futile effort to restore warmth, slipped his hands back into a pair of heavy, but on this night entirely inadequate, driving gloves, and gave himself over to a mental rebellion against the career of a professional taxi driver. "Worst night I've ever known," he growled to himself, and he was not far wrong. Midnight. No train due until 12:25, and that an accommodation from some small town upstate. No taxi fares on such a train as that. The northbound fast train, headed for New York, that was late too. Due at 11:55, Spike had seen a half-frozen station master mark it up as being 50 minutes late. Perhaps a passenger to be picked up there, some sleepy, disgruntled, entirely unhappy person eager to attain the warmth and coziness of a big hotel. Yet Spike knew that he must wait. The company for which he worked specialized on service. It boasted that every train was met by a yellow taxicab, and this was Spike's turn for all-night duty at the Union Station. All the independent taxi drivers had long since deserted their posts. The parking space on Cypress Street, opposite the main entrance of the station, a space usually crowded with commercial cars, was deserted. No private cars were there either. Spike seemed alone in the drear December night, his car an exotic of the early winter. 10 minutes passed. 15. The cold bit through Spike's overcoat, battled to the skin, and chewed to the bone. It was well nigh unbearable. The young taxi driver's lips became blue. He tried to light a cigarette, but his fingers were unable to hold the match. He looked around. A street car, bound for a suburb, passed noisily. It paused briefly before the railroad station, neither discharging nor taking on a passenger, then clanged protestingly on its way. Impressed in Spike's mind was a mental picture of the chilled motorman, and of the conductor huddled over the electric heater within the car. Spike felt a personal resentment against that conductor. Comfort seemed unfair on a night like this, heat a luxury more to be desired than much fine gold. From across the street the light of the White Star Café beckoned. Ordinarily Spike was not a patron of the White Star, nor other eating establishments of its class. The White Star was notoriously unsanitary, its food poisonously indigestible, but as Spike's eyes were held hypnotically by the light, he thought of two things. Within the circle of that light he could find heat and a scalding liquid which was flavored with coffee. The vision was too much for Spike. The fast train, due now at 12:45, might bring a fare. It was well beyond the bounds of reason that he would get a passenger from the accommodation, due in a few minutes. There were no casuals abroad. The young driver clambered with difficulty from his seat. He staggered as he tried to stand erect, his numb limbs protesting against the burden of his healthy young body. A gale howled around the dark Jackson Street corner of the long, rambling station, and Spike defensively covered both ears with his gloved hands. He made his way eagerly across the street, slipping and sliding on the glassy surface, head bent against the driving sleet, clothes crackling where particles of ice had formed. Spike reached the door of the eating house, opened it, and almost staggered as the warmth of the place smote him like a hot blast. For a few seconds he stood motionless, reveling in the sheer animal comfort of the change. Then he made his way to the counter, seated himself on a revolving stool, and looked up at the waiter who came stolidly forward from the big, round-bellied stove at the rear. "Hello, George." The restaurateur nodded. "Hello." "My gosh, what a night!" "Pretty cold, ain't it?" "Cold?" Spike Walters looked up antagonistically. "Say, you don't know what cold means. I'd rather have your job tonight than $1,000,000. Only, if I had $1,000,000, I'd buy 20 stoves, set 'em in a circle, build a big fire in each one, sit in the middle, and tell winter to go to thunder. That's what I'd do. Now, George, hustle and lay me out a cup of coffee. Hot. Get that? And a couple of them greasy doughnuts of yourn." The coffee and doughnuts were duly produced, and the stolid Athenian retired to the torrid zone of his stove. Spike bravely tried one of the doughnuts, and gave it up as a bad job, but he quaffed the coffee with an eagerness which burned his throat and imparted a pleasing sensation of inward warmth. Then he stretched luxuriously and lighted a cigarette. He glanced through the long unwashed window of the White Star Café. "Ladies and gents welcome," it announced, and shuddered at the prospect of again braving the elements. Across the street his unprotesting taxicab stood parked parallel to the curb. Beyond it glowered the end of the station. To the right of the long, rambling structure he could see the occasional glare of switch engines and track walkers' lanterns in the railroad yards. As he looked, he saw the headlight of the locomotive at the head of the accommodation split the gloom. Instinctively Spike rose, paid his check, and stood uncomfortably at the door, buttoning the coat